Good evening. I want to echo what Dr. Ononi said and say thank you all for being here. It's really wonderful to see such a large crowd showing support for our businesses. My name is Greg Madsen. I work with Carillion Clinic, and it's my pleasure to serve as the board chair for the Allegheny Highlands Economic Development Corporation. And I want to say first, thank you for your investment in the Allegheny Highlands. Broadband is so very important. I know you got Ray Leip sitting with you, and he spent many years on the EDC board with me and with us, and been a big contributor to all things Allegheny Highlands. So thank you very much. Marla and Teresa didn't want me to go on any tangents, so they have scripted me and boxed me in with some. So I'm going to have to stick to my script versus going on one of my tangents. I just have a singular role tonight. That's to introduce our very, very important speaker. His name is Stephen Moret. Stephen is the CEO of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, a statewide organization, and he's our guest speaker. Stephen previously served as the Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Economic Development. He was President and CEO of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber of Commerce and Associate at McKinsey & Company. And I see Will Wyndham back there. Stephen did a lot of work with HCA back in his McKinsey days. He also worked as a public policy fellow at the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, assistant chancellor at LSU, and project supervisor at Trinity Consultants. And that's just a partial list. At VEDP, he has collaborated with state, regional, and local partners to craft an ambitious vision focused on transformational goals, including accelerating employment growth, enabling every region to grow, and moving back to the top of the National Business Climate Rankings. He led Virginia's successful state and local team bid for Amazon's second headquarters in Northern Virginia, and he's launching a world-class custom workforce program along with the Virginia Community College System. He's got lots of education. He attended Louisiana State University, received his bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He went on further, received his MBA from the Harvard Business School, and then his doctorate in higher education from the University of Pennsylvania. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Stephen, Dr. Moret, to the podium.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. It's wonderful to be here at Dabney S. Lancaster Community College. Wonderful to be here in the greater Roanoke region and Allegheny Highlands to talk a little bit about economic development in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where we are, where we've been, and where we aspire to go in the future. And let me just say up front, when I finish, I would welcome any comments, questions, suggestions that you all may have. So I'm just going to jump right in, if you don't mind. I've been the president of EDP now for almost 2.5 years. I started January of 2017. And the first thing that we were asked to do was to craft a comprehensive strategic plan for economic development for the Commonwealth and the future of the Commonwealth. And we did that working in close collaboration with hundreds of local, regional, and state partners. Some of our key partners listed up here: Go Virginia, the Port of Virginia, the Virginia Economic Developers Association, the Virginia Chamber, the Roanoke Regional Partnership that many of you know was a central part of that. Beth Dowdy personally served on that growth strategy effort a couple of years ago. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the aspirations that we came up with as part of that process. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. But let me first talk about some of the great things about the Commonwealth. We took stock of all of our assets a couple of years ago to get a sense of what our strengths and weaknesses are. But we start with a really wonderful set of assets to sell to business and to support the companies that are already here today. We are top 10 in the country for educational attainment. In fact, almost in the top 5 in the U.S. in terms of the percentage of our population with a bachelor's degree or higher. The last 2 years in a row, we've been rated the best state for higher education in the country. Our community colleges like Dabney S. Lancaster are a big part of that ranking. Congratulations on the great work that they're doing. We're top 10 for public schools. One of our big selling points when we got to the shortlist for the Amazon project was that of all the top 20 markets in the country they were considering, we had the best public school scores of all of those places. That was a big part of why we won. We have a great mid-Atlantic location. 47% of the U.S. population lives within a day's drive. That's something you talk about here in this region, something we talk about for the Commonwealth as a whole. We have low tax burdens for existing firms in Virginia. That's a significant advantage. We also have, according to U.S. News, their latest ranking best states for business, we have the best regulatory environment in the country. They also rated us #1 for quality of life in the United States. That was a terrific ranking. We have one of the most sophisticated ports in the world. In fact, an asset that WestRock, right here in Covington, makes use of daily as a critical asset for them, not far from here. We also have some incredible airports, both our commercial airports across Virginia, and of course our international airports in Northern Virginia, particularly with Dulles. And one of the things that has impressed me the most about the Commonwealth of Virginia is the incredible quality of companies that are here and the diversity of companies that are here, building world-class products, delivering world-class services all across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that's a great asset as well. And of course, dozens of federal laboratories. So when you look at all these great things, you would think that we would be at the top of the list for growth and that we'd be at the top of the rankings, the business climate rankings and so forth. And we have been historically, but we have not been for the last few years. At the time that we were taking stock of our position in early 2017, we'd actually fallen out of the top 10 in some of those rankings, and we were among the bottom 10 states in terms of our employment growth. In fact, our growth had been so slow, we had actually been experiencing net outmigration of talent. So working with folks in this region and across Virginia, we ultimately settled on 5 big goals, 5 transformational goals for Virginia. The first one is to position Virginia to once again be one of the top 5 to 10 states in terms of employment growth, and not just growth in jobs, but growth in median earned income, the quality of jobs as well. Secondly, we are now one of the only states in the country that has an explicit goal to position every region to grow. We're not going to view ourselves as successful if we're having great growth, but it's all driven by Northern Virginia. We want every region of Virginia to grow. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. We want to get back to the top of the rankings of best states for business. We want to be the best performing state economic development organization in the country. And finally, we want to do all of that with a great spirit of collaboration and alignment. So I want to give you a little bit of an update on how we're doing, some of the wins we've been having, and where we're going for the future as I get through the rest of the presentation. First of all, that goal to get back into the top 10 states. When we ran through our rankings initially, we were already improving a little bit last year. We ranked 30th for growth and employment over the last 5 years, 38th in gross state products, so not great. But the latest rankings were up to 18th and 19th. With some of the wins we had last year, we think we're going to be comfortably back in the top 15, maybe even knocking the door on the top 10. So we're making progress there. When you look at growth across the regions of Virginia, it's important to place in context what's happening nationally. And I think everybody in this room is aware of this. This is looking over the last 5 years through 2017. You can see there was job gains in many places, but losses in many places as well. Much of the country was losing jobs and population, even as other parts of the country were growing. When you look at Virginia in particular, again, in this case, a 10-year period, 2007 to 2017, there were whole parts of Virginia that were in negative territory, even as, say, Northern Virginia, Greater Richmond were growing. In fact, several years ago, when Virginia was setting records for employment growth, there were years when Northern Virginia represented more than 100% of all the growth of Virginia. That is to say, they were booming while much of Virginia was actually losing jobs and losing population. So in this 10-year period, you can see, in fact, the Roanoke region, of which you're a part, was actually negative in that period of time. The last few years, it's gotten a little bit better. This region, at least as a whole, has been in positive territory. But you still see we've got pockets with the Eastern Shore, with the Northern Neck, with Southern Virginia, Southwest Virginia, negative territory. And then we look at the next few years, this is the latest forecast for most of our regions to be in positive territory. For this particular year, we think almost every region, possibly every region of Virginia, will grow this year. But we want every region to grow consistently, right? Not just a one-off year, but consistent, steady growth. So we've made some progress, but we've still got room to improve there. In terms of our national rankings, 10 years ago, we were ranked #1 in Forbes, #1 in CNBC. We were typically in the top 5 of every national business climate ranking. What happened after that is we sort of kind of fell off a cliff a little bit for a variety of reasons. Ultimately bottomed out at below the top 10. The last couple of years we've been jumping back up a little bit, averaged #9, 2017, #8, and 2018. Most recently, we moved up 2 spots in Chief Executive Magazine's ranking of best states for business. We moved up a few in Forbes, a few in CNBC. So we're headed back in the right direction, but we've still got some room, between 8 and number 3, getting back to where we were before. Meanwhile, if you look back 10 years ago, we were ahead of North Carolina. We were ahead of Georgia, but then we kind of fell and they sort of went ahead of us. Now we're closing the gap again. You can see the last couple of years we're starting to get back toward them, but I personally don't like seeing North Carolina ranking ahead of Virginia in any ranking, so we're going to keep working on this. And I'm going to talk about some of the things we need to do to get there. In terms of VDP itself, you may have heard a couple years ago there were a number of challenges at VDP. There was a JLARC report, and I think the head of JLARC said it was the worst performance audit he had seen in his entire career. So that was the organization that I took over in early 2017. We've been working to address all those issues, making a lot of progress. We addressed all the JLARC recommendations. Last year, our lead generation, which is one of the most important things to our locality partners and regional partners, is up 44% year over year. This year we're running about 35% up over that year. So we're almost doubling our lead generation over 2 years. We have now the best European Business Investment Office, I think, of any state EDO in the country. And about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, Site Selection Magazine put out its latest rankings of state economic development organizations, and they said we were the most competitive state EDO in America. So we were pretty proud of that. But we're not counting that as getting back to number 1 yet, because we know there's a lot of things we can still do to get better, but we're definitely making progress. And then finally, when you think about collaboration, we've put a lot of energy into not only trying to serve the whole state, but to regularly travel across Virginia, to regularly work with our partners across Virginia. We're partnering with the governor, with the General Assembly better than we ever have, our local and regional groups, both in this region and elsewhere in Virginia. Other key partners like the Port of Virginia, the Virginia Chamber, and others. These are probably the strongest partnerships we've ever had, and working together we're able to move things forward better than we would otherwise. So we're making some progress. The other thing that's really helped is the General Assembly. Once we cleaned up all the issues with JLARC, they committed to start addressing some of the things that have been holding us back. Virginia was one of the only states in the country a few years ago that did not spend a single dollar marketing the state as a great place for business. We marketed Virginia as a great place for tourism, and they do a wonderful job, but we stopped marketing Virginia as a great state for business, and that's one of the reasons that we had fallen off the cliff. They brought back funding for that. Site development dollars, the most common reason that Virginia loses a manufacturing or distribution project is another state has a better prepared site or building available more quickly than we do. The most common reason, much higher than anything else. We're now starting to invest in that. The other issue that's held us back is workforce solutions. While we have very excellent public schools, excellent higher education system, we've not really had a world-class custom workforce solution program. We've now got funding to launch that in partnership with VCCS. Dabney S. Lancaster will be part of that as well as we continue to roll out. We're really excited about where that's going. So we are heading in the right direction. Last year we had some great wins. It was roughly one of the most successful economic development years in Virginia history. We had about $10 billion worth of announcements. Of course, we had the Amazon HQ2 project, the Micron project. Right here in this area, we had the West Rock investment, almost $250 million underway, announced by the governor several months ago in 2018. Also Schaefer Rolls, the new employer in Covington as well, and many more. This is just a few examples. We had, I think, about 175 or so announcements altogether. So a good year. So the question is, what do we need to do? The last two things I'm going to talk about, and then I'd love to hear your comments or questions. One is what's left to do to really enable us to accomplish those 5 big goals I talked about earlier. There are 10 main things. I'm going to go through those, and then I want to just talk a couple minutes about rural development, and then I'm going to open it up to you. So first of all, what's left? Number 1 on the list is rural broadband. Now, of course, you guys are far ahead of most of rural Virginia in this respect, but it is a hugely important factor, and we're thrilled that the Governor and General Assembly have just roughly quadrupled the amount of funding being made available for this, so that's great. I mentioned site development. We've got a long way to go in that. Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee Most of the other southern states have done a much better job of this than we have. The state's invested not literally zero, but very, very little. Our localities have done a lot of good work. The state needs to be a better partner. We're starting to do that. We need to create America's best custom workforce development program. We've got the funding to launch that now. We just recruited one of the 20-year veterans of the Georgia Quick Start program. If you haven't heard of that program, it's essentially considered the gold standard nationally as typically the best ranked state workforce development program in the country. We now have one of their veterans to help us launch our program. We also need to expand the supply of sub-baccalaureate credentials in critical fields. Think about the Fast Forward program that Dabney S. Lancaster has been a part of. While we certainly want more folks to go on and get traditional college degrees, there's a lot of great job opportunities for people with less than a bachelor's degree. We need to do a better job of meeting those needs. Second five, we see a big opportunity for technology, not just in the big metros, but in the rural regions and smaller metros as well. Think about CGI in Lebanon. Think about the recent 1901 group announcement. I just literally last week met with several major technology companies in the DC metro area talking about this idea. There's a lot of interest in Virginia. You're going to see technology be a statewide phenomenon. Everybody heard about the Amazon announcement. What you may not have heard, we didn't do a good job telling the story, was $1 billion of new investment is going into higher education, not just in Northern Virginia, but statewide. Most of that new investment will be outside of Northern Virginia, expanding computer science and other technology programs across Virginia. You're going to see more jobs connected to that as well. We're going to be expanding our business retention and expansion efforts. That's really critical. I talked about marketing. We're going to continue to build on that. And finally, there's some things we need to do to make our tax code a little bit more of a growth-oriented tax structure, both state and local. So that's the top 10. Finally, I just want to mention a few things about rural development in Virginia. One of the big challenges Virginia has faced, as you know, is our over-reliance on the federal government. But the other one is that when we have this big engine of Northern Virginia, to a lesser extent Hampton Roads and Greater Richmond, I think in a lot of years, Virginia's success, people would look at kind of the aggregate numbers and think things were fine when really a lot of our smaller regions were not doing so well. And these are some of the reasons why. We had zero marketing dollars. We have some of the smallest incentives in the country, which is often an important factor for rural projects. We lack by right incentives and tax benefits that other states have. We had very little investment in site development, as I talked about, which is a common issue that's caused us to lose projects. And we really had no world-class custom workforce solution. The General Assembly, with their support, we're now working to address all these issues. We haven't checked them off by any means, but there's significant investments going into each of these things to make us more competitive. Lastly, we got together a group of rural development stakeholders. We've been meeting regularly over the last 2 years. These are folks like Bill Shelton, who used to be with DHED, Evan Feynman with the Tobacco Commission, several of our local and regional economic development champions, the Virginia Rural Center and others. And we asked the question, what are the things that Virginia could do that we're not doing today that would best position our rural areas to grow? That group has met many times and several times has reaffirmed this priority list. I've touched on most of these. The ones that are in green, 1 through 5 and 7, these are all things that there's forward progress happening on. I talked about the rural marketing efforts. I talked about broadband access, site development, custom workforce solutions, creative partnerships to fund new economic development projects. Those things, we've all made good progress on all those. Taxes, we're a little bit, don't have the political will on that one just yet to address. Community competitiveness, this is a new initiative. We're going to be working with our local and regional partners to really help folks understand, looking at other places with similar population, with similar dynamics, what have they done to position themselves to compete that could be replicated here. And then finally, initiatives on civic leadership. That's the one that we haven't made progress on yet. But a lot of good things have happened. I hope you've been able to get a little sense today that we have taken a rigorous stock of where we stand. We have a lot of things to be proud of in Virginia. It's a wonderful place to live. There are a lot of wonderful companies here, but we have been underperforming a little bit economically, and there's a lot of people now, hundreds of people working on helping improve our competitiveness, helping position Virginia to grow, helping position every region of Virginia to grow. These are the kind of headlines we hope to be looking at a few years from now. With that, I will stop, and I'd be delighted to take any questions or comments you may have for me. Thank you.